Hello YouTube, welcome to another video. Happy New Year. As it's now 2021, I thought it'd be a good idea to make a video about 2020. A complete stats fest, all the data on how much energy you generated, how we used it, how much it cost, how much we saved, all that sort of good stuff. So let's get straight into it. Okay, so let's start with a bar chart for the year. So this is a chart of total generation from all my different inverters. It's split by inverter, and you can see that the green one, MPP Solar, has no entries, and that's because that's the one I've just put in the shed, in my power shed, and it doesn't have any solar panels connected to it yet. Stay tuned, this year that will be happening. But as you can see, the Solax generated the most, or Solar X I think they prefer to be called, generated the most. That's not surprising, since it is by far my biggest inverter. That is a 5 kilowatt inverter. The red one, GrowWatt 1 kilowatt inverter, that was installed at the same time as my Solar X 5 kilowatt inverter, and that also has an array of roof mounted solar panels. So the Solar X and the GrowWatt 1 kilowatt are all my roof mounted solar, and then the GrowWatt 2 kilowatt is my wall mounted solar, which are mounted on a south facing wall. Obviously they are vertical rather than nearly horizontal like the roof ones are. So you can see that it was a bit of a strange year last year, as the peak generation month was actually in May, whereas you would expect in a normal year that it would be sort of June and July would be the peak generation months, since they are closest to the longest day of the year. In fact, here is a graph for the year before, 2019. This is more what you'd expect. So you can see the peaks up around the middle of the year and then drops back off again towards the end of the year. But yeah, last year was unusual. We had a lot of sun in May, and then sort of not such a great June, July, August time. So that's the reason for the unusual peak on this graph. You can also see the difference between roof mounted solar and the wall mounted solar. So the roof mounted solar, obviously at the shortest days of the year, near January and December, you're not getting very much because the sun is very low and it's striking the panels near vertical, so there's very little generation. And then obviously as the sun rises through the year into January, February, March, April, the sun's getting higher and higher, and so it's hitting the panels more perpendicular, which is the optimum for generating energy. And so you would expect it to rise up and peak around June, July-ish, and then start dropping off again as the sun starts descending towards the shortest day of the year again in December. But for the wall mounted panels, it's a different story. They start off low, and this is because although the sun is at the optimum angle for striking those panels, because it's very low on the horizon, it's catching my neighbour's house and some trees and stuff, and the days are very short anyway, so you only get a small amount of generation. But then as the sun starts to rise through the course of the year, by the time you're getting to about March, April time, it's high enough that it's completely missing my neighbour's house and the trees, and so I get a completely clear run of sun on the panels with no shading. So I'm generating good power. And then as the year continues on and we get to the longest days of the year, near June, July, then the sun is very high and it's hitting the panel at a very steep angle. So the generation is much reduced. And then of course, as the year goes on, the sun starts to descend in the sky again. And by September, it's low enough that it's striking the panels at a good angle, making good power, but it's also still high enough to be above my neighbour's house. And then as the year progresses on to the shortest days of the year, we're getting a lot of shading on those panels again, and so the power drops off. So you get this kind of double peak look to the vertical graph and a single big peak to the roof mounted panels graph. Okay, so now let's have a look at the best day of the year. So the best day of the year last year was on the 5th of May. We generated 50.2 kilowatt hours, and here is a graph of the output for that day. So you can see that total solar output in the middle of the day was around sort of 7,300 watts, thereabouts. That's the total of all my solars together. Obviously the Solar X generates the most, as it's a 5 kilowatt inverter. You see it's just under 5 kilowatts, and that's what you would expect. It's not going to be 100% efficient, and obviously, as it's would have been a very hot sunny day, the heat on the panels does tend to make them less efficient, so you do lose a bit of energy there, but that's pretty good. And you can see here the GrowWatt 1 kilowatt as well is also a nice smooth curve, except right at the very end where it drops off suddenly, and that's because the back of my house has a hill on it, and as the sun descends, eventually it just goes behind the hill, and so we get no further generation, so we miss out on a little bit just there. And you can see with the GrowWatt 2 kilowatt inverter that it starts off quite low, and this is because the sun is striking the panels from a sharp angle as it's right across in the east, and then eventually it clears around to the point where there's no structures casting any shadow on it, and then suddenly it ramps up quickly, and then we get good generation all day long until the end of the day. So this was obviously a really good day. There was no clouds. This was obviously a perfectly clear day, as you can see from the nice smooth curves. If there'd been clouds there, you'd have had lots of jaggy lines where the power drops and then comes back up again. So let's have a look at the worst day. So here we can see the worst day. This was on the 21st of December, and it was pretty bad. We generated just 0.8 kilowatt hours. Now obviously the days in the winter months, and particularly around the shortest day of the year, which I think this is very close to being, you'd expect there to be very little generation, as the days are very, very short. But also it tends to be grey most every day through the winter months, particularly around here it seems. So the sun doesn't peek through that much, so you get a very low level of generation. You can see it peaks here at maybe about a kilowatt at the best, but for the most part it's not very much. So if we compare the best day and the worst day by overlapping the two, you can see quite markedly the difference between the amount of generation you get in the middle of summer and the amount of generation you get in the middle of winter. I mean, it's chalk and cheese. The power generation is just vast in the summer, and it's a struggle to use all of that energy. But this tiny amount in the winter is just barely enough to cover the energy use in the house during the short amount of time when it's generating, and the rest of the time we either have to pull from the grid or we have to run off the batteries. In total we generated 7,925 kilowatt hours, which is almost 8 megawatt hours, which I think is none too shabby. You can see here from this pie chart that we managed to use in the house 80% of that, and we exported 19.3%, which is about 1.5 megawatt hours. Now my goal every year is to make that exported percentage as small as possible. In a perfect scenario it would be zero and I'd have 100% usage. But in the summer, the amount of energy generated on a clear day is just so vast, it's really hard to use all of it. So I don't think we'll ever get that down to zero, but the closer to zero we get it, the better. What does that mean in financial terms? Well, last year, for the 12 months of generation, we earned £861.43 from our FIT payments and £178.50 from our export payments. That gives a total of £1,039.93 for the year. But that's not the full story. We also, as I just mentioned, managed to use 80% of the power we generated ourselves. If we were to have to pay for that power at the standard electricity rate, it would have cost us £883.66. So we've made a further saving, which, when you add that onto the total, gives us a total of very nearly £2,000 for the year. Last year we imported 4,253 kilowatt hours from the grid. I'm on the Octopus Go tariff, and most of that imported energy will have been used during the cheap rate, which is between midnight and 4:30 in the morning. But some of the rest of it will have been used during normal times because of the fact that in the winter months there just isn't enough solar to run the house, and sometimes even the batteries run out and we have to pull from the grid, so the rest of that will be made up of normal rate electricity. But for that year, the total cost of the electricity that we imported was about £402. Now, had we been on standard Octopus tariff, i.e. not the Go tariff, without that cheap rate at night, that same amount of energy usage would have cost us £695. So it's about £300 better per year for us to be on the Octopus Go tariff than to be on the standard Octopus tariff. One of the good things about all the data I store from my system is that I can run my entire year's data against various companies' prices and see which company would offer me the best deal based on my real usage, and that's very handy. But at the moment, nothing beats Octopus Go. So if you're interested in going on to Octopus Go, please check out my referral link in the notes below, and we'll both get £50 if you join. So the last thing to talk about is the cars, really. We have a plug-in hybrid Mitsubishi, which has a range of about 25 miles on the battery alone, which in most cases is all we ever use because very few of our trips in that car are more than 25 miles. And we have a Nissan Leaf, which has a range of about 75 miles, and that's what we use for most of our taking the kids to school and going shopping, all the normal sorts of daily activities, which we're not doing at the moment obviously because of the whole COVID thing. So these numbers are probably a bit reduced based on what would be a normal year, because I've been working from home and not really using the car to commute to work every day. We put 2,240 kilowatt hours into the Leaf and 774 kilowatt hours into the PHEV. Now, 29% of that energy we generated ourselves from the solar, so that was at no cost. The remaining 71% is made up of cheap rate Octopus imported energy at a cost of 5p a kilowatt hour. So that comes to a total of £106.50 total cost for running those two cars last year, which gave us around 10,590 miles of electric driving. Now, I'm not sure what that equates to in petrol costs. Feel free to work that out if you want, but 10,590 miles of petrol I think will probably cost significantly more than £106. So here you can really see the benefits of an EV, and particularly when coupled with a tariff like Octopus Go and having the ability to generate your own electricity from solar. So there you have it. That's the entire data for 2020. My idea is that I would probably try and do videos like this every year, to give the same information as a way of a good comparison from year to year of how things differ, and as things change. I also have an idea to do something similar to this on a monthly basis, to just show how much we generated in the month and exactly where we used it, and how much we saved by doing that, and it would give a bit more detail into the batteries and how they help out a lot. So I hope you found that useful. I hope there's enough information there. If there's anything else that you would like to know more, I can probably tease it out of my data. It just takes a bit of coding to write something to extract the information in the right form. But yeah, if there's anything more that you think would be of interest, put it in the show notes, in the comments below, and I'll try and deal with it in a future video. In the meantime, thanks for watching. Like and subscribe, etc., all that sort of stuff, and I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.